All right, well, here we go. World War One. So we've covered a lot of topics this semester already, from life in the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, to the monarchs, to scientific revolution, industrial revolution, Napoleon. All have been very important topics, but really, I have to always tell my students there's no topic I lecture on that is more important than World War One. And people say, well, what about World War Two? And my reply is always, well, you don't get World War Two without World War One. So while World War II is definitely the lecture I'm most passionate about, and we'll definitely spend a lot of time on that, World War I is the topic that I think is the most significant event in all of human history. And it's also a very detailed topic. There's a lot of information to it. And what we're going to be doing over 2 weeks, we're going to spend this week and next week on World War I, is obviously lecturing on the war. I also have a couple really good documentaries that I'm going to require you to watch. You'll have a discussion on that as well. These are just an amazing series. It's amazing. They did this series, I don't know, like 30 years ago now. And it is the only thing I think I still use in terms of a documentary that I still use now that I used when I started to teach because it's just that good. And so I'm going to show you some of that as well. It's like an 8-part series. I'm not going to show you 8 parts of it, of course, but you'll be required to watch a couple parts of it. And it is really the defining event. And so we're going to go through it. We're going to talk about the causes first. And some of the causes of World War I are pretty straightforward. Some are really easy to understand. Other causes are incredibly complicated. In fact, I brought with me a book so you can see. It's called Sleepwalkers, and I want to show you how thick it is. And I went through this book when I picked it up, and it's all marked everywhere, and all the readings I did on it. And this book, Sleepwalkers, as thick it is about one cause of World War One. So that's how much information. Just imagine that one book alone, just on one cause of World War One. It is definitely the most complicated event we're covering this semester. So you really want to stay focused, take good notes on it. If you need to watch this a second time, watch it a second time because it's very important. Again, all of this is material you need for quiz number 2. So keep that in mind as well. All right, so let's kind of go through how the war happened. So actually, before you even go through that, the causes is the first thing you'll need to know. The other thing I just want to set up for you is, other than knowing the causes, then as we do more lectures, you're going to also need to know about the course of the war itself, how the war was fought, what happened during the war. And then the most important thing are the impacts, right? I always say you have to know the impacts of World War One. You need to know the impacts during the war. You need to know the impacts after the war. You need to know the impacts a generation later. In other words, the impacts during the war. What happened to people as the war was going on? The impacts as soon as the war ends. The war ends, now what? And the impacts a generation later, war, generation after World War One, you're still seeing big ramifications of the war. So some of this we're going to cover in the next couple of weeks, but we're going to be talking about the impacts of World War One all the way until we get to World War Two. So it's going to come up on several lectures. Okay, so I hope you understand that. All right, here we go. So here, let's start with some of the causes, right? And some of the causes of World War One, we've kind of already talked about. Nationalism keeps coming up. It came up with the unification of Italy and Germany. It came up a little bit with colonization. It's going to come up again in this lecture, and you'll see how it comes up. So for now, just kind of know it. Know that nationalism is going to play a big role. It's going to play a especially important role when we talk about the regions of the Balkans. So just be prepared for that as being a cause of World War One. Another cause of World War One, which we already discussed, is the unification of Germany, right? If you don't have a unification of Germany, you never have the war, remember. Germany's sitting in the central part of Europe. When they took that territory of Alsace-Lorraine from France, if you remember, I'll show you the map again here in a second, but during that Franco-Prussian War, that land was taken, and that's going to alienate France, and it's going to create a lot of tensions between France and Germany. So that's going to help trigger the war as well. So these are things we've covered before. I'm not spending a lot of time on them right here because you should already know these from previous lectures. So nationalism, which I'm going to expand on, unification of Germany because it creates a strong power in the central part of Europe, the conflict it created with France, and then also, colonization. How would colonization have caused World War One? Well, remember, colonization created a lot of rivalries between these powers of Europe, whether it's England or France or Russia and all these powers, Germany. And so they have things to fight over. They have bargaining chips that are going to play a role in the negotiations and the dealings behind the table, under the table and all that. So these are things that are going to help increase tension as well between these European powers. And then another topic that we haven't talked about yet, but is definitely worth noting, there is going to be a growing arms race in Europe during these years. And what do I mean by an arms race? Well, basically what I'm getting at is just a growing military. Just a couple statistics for you. From 1890 to 1914, the European military machine doubled. So 1890, 1914, of course, is when World War I breaks out, if you don't already know that. That's when that the machine doubles. Russia alone, before World War I starts, will have a standing army of about 1.3 million men, and it's going to get bigger. So that gives you a sense of what I'm talking about. Massive armies, 1.3 million men. Remember, the Napoleonic army was what, 600,000 men, and this is already double that, and this is just one nation, so it's going to be something that we've never seen before in human combat. By the way, before I go any further, I just mentioned the war starts in 1914. A really good movie, a couple really good movies, or one I'll tell you now, another one I'll give you another one a little bit later. But 1917, a recent movie that came out 2019, I believe, 2019 roughly, 2018, roughly around time period came out. That was a really good movie depicting the elements of fighting during World War I. So that's one that's really good to check out. And then there was another documentary, I think it's called They Shall Not Grow Old, I believe the title is, or They Don't Grow Old, and they took World War I footage and they put it into color. And it's really, really good. I have that on DVD actually. I can't, find it online like on YouTube or anything, so I use it in my traditional classes. Here I use the other videos that are really good as well. But there's a lot of stuff on World War I. Just I mentioned the book, I mentioned movies. There's a lot of amazing resources on the war. Everybody knows about World War II, but in many ways there's so much more information we need to learn about World War I. So it's a very important topic. So this arms race, as I was saying, that's going to create a lot of tension between these European powers as well. So these are all things building up, late 1800s, early 1900s, causing conflicts, causing tensions between these European powers that's going to help trigger the war. All right, so I hope all that's clear. Here's just our map again to remind us. This is going to be a map we're going to use multiple times, but again, the territory of Alsace-Lorraine here between France and Germany. Here you see clearly Germany in the central part of Europe. I'll explain what all these colors mean and all of that as we go through the story of the war, but this is just to remind us of what we were talking about before. Now, all of those are important causes of World War I. There's another cause that's the most complicated one. So we're going to focus on this next cause for quite a bit here. You need to follow it carefully. This is the really tricky one that Sleepwalkers book I mentioned talks about. And it's this idea of what we call entangled alliances. So here it is, entangled alliances, step one. This is going to be quite kind of mental gymnastics, and you have to follow it. I also have a chart that I put there for you guys to print out. Once you're done with the lecture, print it out and use that to help you, kind of the flow of what's going to happen. But listen to all this first, take your normal notes, and then use that chart to help you. So it's there for this week's information as well. So just kind of print that out. So what are these entangled alliances? How did they cause World War I? There's going to be three major alliance systems when we get to World War I. But before we get there, there's going to be a couple of alliance systems that we need to talk about first that help bring about the war. So there's kind of the pre-war alliances and the war alliances. So this gets really tricky. So let's start with 1873. This is years before World War I breaks out. And Germany had just unified. And when Germany unified, Bismarck, if you remember, Otto von Bismarck, says he wants friends. He knows he probably upset France a little bit. And so he goes to Austria-Hungary and Russia and say, hey guys, how would you like to be part of what we call the Three Emperors League? And this Three Emperors League would consist of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia. And they would agree to work together in order to partnership and defend each other in case any one of them is attacked. Well, this Three Emperors League does not stand for very long. Why does it not stand for very long? Well, mainly Russia. Russia has an issue with Germany, and Russia has an issue with Austria-Hungary. Shortly after the Three Emperors League was created in 1878, roughly, there was a meeting called the Congress of Berlin. And in this Congress of Berlin, the Germans basically used their influence to take this country of what all these three colors here, Bulgaria, and split it into thirds, right? One, two, three. You can see the three colors. So basically, Bulgaria was bigger, and Bulgaria now becomes smaller. And you go, what does this have to do with anything? Well, Russia had a lot of influence over Bulgaria, and when Bulgaria was divided, excuse me, Russia wasn't happy. And who is Russia going to blame for this? Germany. And so this creates actually does two things. One, it's going to make Russia not want to play ball with Germany, but even more importantly, it increases the tension between Russia and Germany. So that was an issue. The other issue that's going to break apart this initial alliance is the issue of the Balkans. Now, if you don't know what the Balkans are, I'll show you a map of that a little bit later. The Balkans are in the area where kind of just north of Greece, right? And again, I'll show you maps of this as we get to it and talk about more detail. But that's an area that Austria-Hungary wanted influence over, and so did Russia. So there are regions in Europe that Germany and Austria-Hungary wanted influence over, and Russia wanted influence over. And they simply couldn't see eye to eye. So long story short, this initial alliance, this Three Emperors League, collapses. So it starts in 1873. It only lasts for about 4, 5, 6 years, and then it falls apart. So now Germany and Austria-Hungary remain allied, but Russia bails, which then gets the Germans to think, well, okay, if Russia doesn't want to play ball, maybe somebody else will form an alliance with us. At which point, Germany, and Austria-Hungary look for a new ally. So this is their second attempt. And who did they decide to form another alliance with around 1880? Italy. So here you have this map of Italy, and Germany and Austria-Hungary decide to form an alliance with Italy. And again, this alliance holds for, but not permanently. By the time World War I breaks out, this alliance is going to collapse. Why? Well, first of all, if you remember back to previous lecture, it's a little bit of a surprise alliance even. Why? Well, think about this critically. Why would Italy even have agreed to join this alliance in the first place? Remember when Italy was created, they had to fight Austria-Hungary for land. So they're not going to be too buddy-buddy. But, they thought, all right, maybe we'll work with them and so forth. Except for the problem that there were these two pieces of real estate called Trieste and Trentino. These real estate areas, they're really small. You probably can't see them here, but they're kind of way up here in the northern parts of Italy. Austria had influence over those areas. And basically, France and England went to Italy and told Italy, hey, you jump ship with Germany and Austria-Hungary, and we'll help you get Trieste and Trentino. So, long story short, circa 1880, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, they form an alliance, but that's going to fall apart as well. So Germany's still desperate to find that third ally. Yes, Austria-Hungary is strong, but they're always looking for somebody else to help them. What ends up happening? Well, by the time World War I actually breaks out, this is the first of the three World War I alliances. So these first two things were the pre-war alliances. This is the Central Powers. And what ends up happening is Germany finally agrees to form an alliance with Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. Why the Ottoman Empire? Well, I actually cover this when I teach my History of the Middle East class, and I spend a lot of time on the Ottoman Empire and why the Ottoman Empire ends up agreeing to join Germany and Austria-Hungary. In this class, you don't need to worry about that too much, but you definitely want to know that was the final agreement. So when World War I breaks out, the first alliance you need to know during the war is the Central Powers. So you need to know Central Powers, and you need to know it consists of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. If you have all that down, you should be good to go in terms of understanding the first alliance. And again, this is our map. Here's Germany, here's Austria-Hungary, and this is the Ottoman Empire, and that's why we call them the Central Powers, right? Because they run down the central part of Europe. So obviously, as this is happening, somebody's getting a little nervous. Who's going to get nervous? Well, France is going to be a bit nervous. Anybody else in Europe is a little bit nervous. And so this is going to get us to our second alliance system when we get to the start of the war in 1914. What's the second alliance system? Well, let's go to it. The second alliance system is what we call the Triple Entente and includes England, France, and Russia. So yeah, England, France, and Russia, right? And this is kind of amazing in so many levels. First of all, England and France, they've hated each other forever, but they agree to join forces. And Russia, what does Russia want to join with England and France? Why does England okay with this even? Well, it's very pragmatic. One of the things about colonization is that these countries had influence in different areas. And for example, one of the things England was very concerned about is if they didn't have an alliance with Russia, Russia might go after their interest in India. This is kind of the mental gymnastics that's taking part here. So long story short, England, France, Russia, they agree to join forces in what we call the Triple Entente. And again, here you see on our map, England, Great Britain, France, and Russia. And the other reason, of course, why this alliance made sense is this way they at least can surround the Central Powers. This will be important when we get to the actual war. So now we have two major alliance systems, right? We have the Triple Entente and we have the Central Powers. Let's move on because there's one more alliance system, and it's going to have to do with this region that I mentioned before, the Balkans. This whole area here I'm circling, the Balkans. This is what I call the Slavic Alliance. And what is the Slavic Alliance? It is an alliance between Russia and Serbia. And here's Serbia, here's Russia, of course. Why do they ally? Well, this has to do with nationalism. Serbia, the people living in Serbia are Slavic people. They had migrated from Russia centuries earlier. So in a way, basically, I think this is the easiest way to understand this. Russia sees Serbia as kind of their little sister, and they're going to protect her. So Russia says to Serbia, we'll protect you, especially since Austria-Hungary and Serbia were often at each other's throat, right? And a little bit of foreshadowing here for what's going to happen. So this alliance system, actually, the Slavic alliance, is going to be key because this is actually where World War I is going to explode. And so let's kind of get a little deeper into the detail here as we talk about the Slavic alliance and why this is important to help trigger World War I. All right, so now we have a close-up map of the Balkans. So here again, here's Russia, right? Here's the Ottoman Empire. This is Austria-Hungary. And here is Serbia. So what happens here that's going to help bring about the war? Well, this is what's going to happen. For many years in the 1800s, Austria-Hungary was trying to have influence in the Balkans. Specifically, Austria-Hungary took control of these regions known as Bosnia and Herzegovina. You need to know all this, right? Make sure you get all the details down here. And so they take over those areas. The problem is those areas had a lot of Slavic people in them. And the people in Serbia didn't like that. The people in Serbia wanted Bosnia and Herzegovina to be part of a greater Serbia. Essentially, they wanted a pan-Slavic Serbia. All pan, meaning all panorama, right? All. They wanted to be together. Like, well, if Germany could be Germany and Italy could be Italy, well, we should be Serbia, and this would be part of a greater Serbia. Austria-Hungary didn't want to let that area go. And so there was a lot of conflicts there. And these conflicts are going to rage from the late 1800s. And, for a while, it was the Ottoman Empire that controlled this land. The Ottoman Empire was losing that territory. So that made this whole area up for grabs. Austria-Hungary's moving in. Serbia's moving in. And there's conflicts. All right. What ends up happening? Well, we end up jumping to 1914. And in 1914, there was an organization known as the Black Hand. And the Black Hand was a very radical extremist organization that wanted Bosnia and Herzegovina to be part of Greater Serbia. Okay, so that's what they want. So they want this to happen, but what ends up happening, in one of their figures, a man named Gavrilo Princip is going to take quite a big feat to make that happen. What is Gavrilo Princip going to do? He's going to assassinate the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And when he assassinates Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, all hell is about to break loose. Because who is Austria-Hungary going to blame? Austria-Hungary is not going to blame the Black Hand. Austria-Hungary is going to blame Serbia. And I should have read this a little bit earlier, but let me read this to you actually, because even before all of this happened, there was a British ambassador. This is before the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Listen to this. Serbia, this is from a British ambassador before World War I, before the assassination. Serbia will someday set Europe by the ears and bring about a universal war on the continent. It will be lucky if Europe succeeds in avoiding a war as a result of the present crisis. He's talking about all the Balkan wars. The next time a Serbian crisis arises, I feel sure that Austria-Hungary will refuse to admit of any Russian interference in the dispute, and she will proceed to settle her differences with her little neighbor by herself. What this British ambassador was doing is predicting exactly how World War I is going to break out before World War I started. He's saying at some point something big is going to happen here. Austria-Hungary is going to be pissed. They're going to go after Serbia with a vengeance, and then all heck's going to break loose. And that's exactly what's about to happen. So here is Principe. I just always show a picture of him. He barely looks like he weighs 100 pounds dripping wet. He is responsible for the assassination of the Archduke, Franz Ferdinand. And after he assassinates him, he's going to get captured. He was under 21, so actually they didn't give him the death penalty. He tried to commit suicide by taking, I think, some cyanide or something. It didn't work while he was in prison. They gave him like a life prison term. But then he died a few years later from tuberculosis. So he's dead, right? A few years later, but it doesn't matter. By now, he had already assassinated the Archduke and his wife, and this is going to, of course, be the issue that's going to help trigger the war. So I hope all of that was clear. Now, how does this help trigger the war? Let's look at the domino effect of this. So here we have Austria-Hungary, right? And here we have Serbia. Follow me on this. So now what I'm going to do, so when the assassination, about June 1914 was the assassination. By August 1914, World War I is basically on. And it all happens within about a month and a half, right? And the exact order all of this happens doesn't matter, but I want you to understand the reasonings behind it, the domino effect of it all. That's what I want you to be able to grasp. So Austria-Hungary is very upset. Their Archduke has been assassinated. They're going to attack Serbia. Well, Russia, of course, has an alliance with Serbia, so Russia is going to go after Austria-Hungary. If Russia is at war with Austria-Hungary, well, Austria-Hungary has an alliance with Germany and the Ottoman Empire. So Germany and the Ottoman Empire are going to have to be at war with Russia. Well, all right, if Russia is at war with Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, remember, Great Britain and France, they have an alliance with Russia. So that's going to draw them into the war, and everything goes vice versa as well. And all of a sudden, boom, all these European countries are at war within a month and a half. So I know I went through that very quickly, right? And so again, you have it in your chart. Look at that flow chart I gave you. It really is very clear. I spent quite a bit of time working on that to make sure it's clear. And that printout that I told you to print out and use is going to help you kind of follow the bouncing ball on that. But you do need to understand all that. I also posted a funny little video as well that goes through it again, so you can kind of watch that as well. It's actually kind of this funny explanation of it. But again, that is how World War I essentially breaks out. So there's this assassination here, and then all of a sudden all these European powers are fighting each other. So I hope that's clear. Again, I hope you understand the domino effect. Again, Austria to Serbia, Russia against Austria, Germany and the Ottoman Empire against Russia, and then Great Britain and France, respectively, attacking, all of these other powers as well. And again, it looks like one big mess, and it really is about to be one big mess. All right, other than that, so that's technically the start of the war. But there are a couple other causes I want you to know about as well. So let me go off to a couple other points that I think are really important. This guy is Kaiser William II. He is the ruler of Germany when World War I breaks out, and he himself is a cause of the war. Why? Well, look what he's wearing. Almost every time you see Kaiser William II, he's always wearing a military uniform. If you see a leader of a nation who's always wearing a military uniform all the time, worry, right? What does that mean? It means he's very militarily aggressive. He always sought out war. And if there was somebody else in charge of Germany other than Kaiser William II, maybe a war doesn't happen. But this guy was ready to jump right into the war first chance he got. So I think that's another major factor as to why World War I breaks out. So you have that individual as a cause of the war as well. Another major cause of the war is this enthusiasm. And what do I mean by this? These are a couple great primary sources that I'm going to read to you from. And as I read from these sources, I want you to jot down the words that jump at you as to the view of the war when the war starts. Okay, so just kind of this couple primary sources. Roland d'Orgilès from France, Stephen Zweig's from Austria. One's from France, one's from Austria. So I'm giving you two different sides of the war. And I'm just going to read to you some excerpts. And again, you jot down the words as you hear these primary sources of the time. All right, so the first one is from that fabulous day. Suddenly, heroic wind lifted their heads. Young and old, civilian and military men burned with the same excitement. It was like a brotherhood day. Beginning the next day, thousands of men, eager to fight, would jostle one another outside recruiting offices. I close my eyes, and they appear to me those volunteers of that great day. And then from that rushing feeling of fraternity, this one's going to be a little longer. And to be truthful, I must acknowledge that there was a majestic, rapturous, even seductive something at the first outbreak. All differences of class, rank, and language were flooded over at that moment by a rushing feeling of fraternity. Strangers spoke to one another in the streets. People who had avoided each other for years shook hands. Everywhere one saw excited faces. The petty mail clerk who ordinarily sorted letters early and late, who sorted constantly, who sorted from Monday until Saturday without interruption. The cobbler had suddenly achieved a romantic possibility in life. He could become a hero, and everyone who wore a uniform was greeted beforehand with a romantic appellation by those who had to remain behind. So, if you look at your list of words that I want you to jot down, you should have things like romantic and rapturous and majestic and seductive and fresh recruits, right? I want you to kind of keep that list. If you need to go back and listen to that again, listen to those words again and make a list. And you'll see why, because in the next lecture, I'm going to say, hey, remember that list. Now, these sources in 1914, when the war breaks out, that was the idea. And why such enthusiasm? Well, it was this whole period of time, this optimism, right? There was another key point, I think, before I go on, is there was also no sense of negotiations at the time. I think one of maybe the factors World War I broke out, you don't have, if that would happen today, assassination, do you think everybody in Europe would be in war within a month and a half? Not a chance, right? There would be discussions, there would be sanctions. It would take a while, and things would have to be really get bad before war breaks out. But I want you to realize something. These guys have not fought a major war since the Napoleonic period. Look at this image. So this is a great photo because this is an image right as the war starting. And look at the enthusiasm. Look at them celebrating. They're about to go off to war, and everybody's happy. It's like they're off to a big game. And as you look at this image and you listen to those words that I read from those sources, do they make sense? And they do make sense in 1914. This is that optimism that I've been hammering at you guys for several lectures now. You're colonizing, you're industrializing, you're unifying. You can marry who you want to marry. The Spanish-American War, remember I said I'd come back to it, it's called a splendid little war. And so in many respects, people were living this amazing dream in 1914. And this is in part what allowed World War I to happen. Well, unfortunately for many people, this dream of Western civilization is about to turn into a nightmare that will forever shatter Western civilization. And that nightmare is what we're going to pick up on in our next lecture. All right, so I hope you kind of understand the causes. Again, that was very detailed. There's a lot of stuff there. So make sure, if you need to listen to all that again, do so. If you need to, you definitely use that printout I gave you. If you want to learn a lot more about it, again, that Sleepwalkers book is an excellent book to read. I'd say it's an easy read if you have a little bit of a background, and it's a good information. All right, if you have any questions on that, don't hesitate to contact me, right? Again, I'm always happy to set up meetings with anybody if you have any questions. All right, thank you.